Okay. Well, welcome to Quixotic Heights. Today's guest has made it his mission to connect readers with stories and storytellers within the community. Jay Hall is an author, educator, and the host and producer of the Okie Bookcast. It's a show that's dedicated to introducing curious readers to their next great read. Since launching the podcast in 2021, he has released more than 150 episodes, interviewing authors across genres and building a vibrant literary space rooted right here in Oklahoma. In 2026, he expanded that mission by launching Read LOKal, a platform that champions Oklahoma authors and booksellers and strengthens the state's literary ecosystem. And beyond podcasting, Jay is the author of God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad, 10 Essentials for Becoming the Dad Your Kids Need, and College Unpacked, a practical guide to choosing, preparing for, and excelling in college. So professionally, Jay serves as Dean of Social Sciences at Oklahoma City Community College, where he works daily at the intersection of education, mentorship, and lifelong learning. Does that sound like you, Jay?
Well, I'm tired now, but that does sound just like me. Yeah.
Well, welcome to Quixotic Heights. How are you?
Thanks, Amy. I'm doing great. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you, and I enjoy your background because a lot has changed in 150 episodes.
It has.
But let's start with your Quixotic Heights dream. What was the defining moment for you?
I don't know that there was a single moment. Well, maybe there was. The dream was to figure out a way to platform Oklahoma authors, and it developed slowly. My daughter is also an author, and she put her first book out during COVID, which, as you well know, was the worst possible time to put a book out because you couldn't do anything with it other than just tell the world via the internet. So we were looking for different places to for her to just talk about it, podcasts or any other platforms, and just weren't finding very many. There wasn't a lot of bookish content out there, and what was there was really focused on Big Five publishing, or it was more about reviews and recommendations than talking with authors. So that was September of 2020. Fast forward to the summer of 21. I'm still working from home and had a day where I realized that I had sat in the same chair for about 12 hours between work and then after work and whatever, and had this moment where I thought, man, I got to figure out something to do or I'm probably going to die sitting in this chair, and sooner rather than later. So I started reading some books and thinking about, okay, kind of what's the next step. My wife and I were right next to the empty nest. Our daughter, our youngest, sorry, was a senior in high school. So she was getting ready to leave. And I was reading a book called Start by a guy named John Acuff. And one of the things he talks about is just talk about or write down, make a list of the things that you're passionate about, the things you like to do. And so one Friday afternoon, I just started writing things down that I was kind of into, went to bed. Woke up the next morning at 6:30, which is not a thing I ever do. 6:30 Saturday morning and I are not friends. We do not hang out. That's not a thing that happens. But I woke up and I couldn't go back to sleep. And in my head was this idea for a podcast about Oklahoma authors and writing in Oklahoma. And I'd never had two thoughts about starting a podcast, had no idea how to do it, hadn't really even listened to very many of them. But I couldn't get out of my head and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I got up, walked to my office, wrote down kind of, okay, here's all the things I'm thinking about. Here's what the format would be. Here's kind of how we do it. And then went on with the day and could not get it out of my head. So I spent the next 6 weeks trying to talk myself out of it because it sounded like a lot of work and things I just didn't know how to do. And the more I investigated it, the more intrigued about it I got and the more passionate about it I got. And so that was July going into August. By the 1st of September, I had announced to the world that the Okie Bookcast was coming. And a month later, on October 5th, 2021, out it came with one of my first two guests being Amy M. Lee, which is how you know about the evolution of the closet, because you saw the first one that was much tighter than this.
What a story. So what was on your list other than this podcast? And what were some of your passions?
Well, yeah, so podcasting wasn't on the list at all, but
Oh,
teaching was one thing. So I have always been an educator in professional ministry and then my life now in higher ed. I've always been interested in education and teaching and connecting dots. I love creativity. I have been a creative human for as long as I can remember. I also like technical stuff. So the nerdy kind of audio technology side of it really appealed a little bit. So that was on the list. Um, gosh, I probably should have that list just written somewhere. And then I loved writing and I love to read. And so I have always been intrigued by that process. I hadn't really written anything. I had like a poem or two published, but nothing really exciting at that point. And all of those things and probably 10 more. And yeah, just somehow that mix of things woke me up too early on Saturday morning and turned into something that now has been going for 4.5 years. And as you mentioned, 150 episodes and hundreds of authors and really just a lot of fun.
Thank goodness you woke up at 6:30 in the morning that Saturday morning.
I will never say that, but yeah, I'm glad I did that day.
Okay, so I love the title though, Okie Bookcast.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that? What I love about your podcast is that you have chapters, you
Right.
know, not episodes, but chapters. So tell me
That's
more
right.
about how you were inspired to name it the Okie Bookcast.
So that wasn't the first name.
Okay.
On the list, on that original list was Booklahoma.
Mm.
And when I searched that, I found out that Magic City Books in Tulsa had a whole merch line called Booklahoma. And I was like, well, I'm not going to get into a
Oh,
battle with Magic City Books. So Okie Bookcast was kind of just the next thing. And I would love to tell you that it was inspired by these five things and that I really thought about John Steinbeck and the Grapes of Wrath and Okie, and none of that would be true. It really
mhm.
was just how do I make sure that I'm expressing this is about Oklahoma and this is about books and writing. And those two things made it really, really simple to come up with a name. And then it also worked out that as I looked, nothing remotely close to that existed. And all of the Twitter handles and Instagram handles were available. So it really kind of just fit together easily.
I'm sorry, my dog is totally in our podcast.
We've got a guest.
We do have a guest, and you asked me earlier if I was going to edit that. We'll see.
But then as far as the chapter thing, it was one of those deals that it just made sense. You know, if we're the trailer is called the prologue, and we've just kind of gone from there. So we just recorded chapter 81 that'll be released next week. But by the time this comes out, I think we'll be on 82 or so.
Wow. So how do you curate your guests?
It's a combination of people who reach out to me and people who I would love to be able to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of fun that as we've gained some traction and been around a little while, I have been amazed at the level of author who is willing to say yes when we reach out to come on the show. When we first started and the way that you and I connected, I went to the OWFI Facebook group and said,
Yeah.
hey, I'm doing this thing. Would anybody like to talk to me? And you were the first person to jump on and say yes. Jeff Provine was a part of that. Roger Corby, there were three or four others. So early on, it was anybody who would talk to me. And I was actually kind of shocked. I thought I could do one episode a month, and boy, I sure hope I've got enough to do 12.
Yes.
And man, did I find out how massive the literary world of Oklahoma is, far more than I think most people think about. In fact, we have listeners all over the country and all over the world. And one of the comments I get from folks all the time is, I had no idea.
Mm.
Not just the some of the authors that they find out, oh, wait a minute, they're from Oklahoma, but also just the breadth and the depth of talent and the incredible work that goes on here. So it's a joy to be able to put that out in the world. The biggest challenge I have now is curating that list, because I got a message right before we got on from an author that I didn't know saying, how do I get on the show? And one of the hardest things I have to do is say, I don't know that that's going to be possible.
Yeah.
Not because I don't want to talk to everybody, but because we only do we only do one interview episode a month, and then we do the book review and recommendation show with my daughter and bring authors on there as well. So that's 24 authors a year. We do a couple of roundtables, and there's more than that want to be on. And so one of the big things that I do when I'm trying to decide about who we want to bring on the show is what story do they have to tell beyond just the work that they create. Not that that's not great, but as you know as an author and I know, we can talk about our books for about 10 minutes and then we kind of run out of gas or people get tired of listening to us. And
Mm-hmm.
so, one of the reasons that you and I talked was because of your story, as coming from Vietnam and your mom and all the things that came into the books that you created. So we need those kinds of stories because that's what keeps people listening beyond, oh, that's an interesting book. Or I have lots of folks who will tell me I couldn't have cared less about the book, but they were really interesting. And so I enjoyed listening to them talk about not just their work, but the other things around them. So I wish there was a scientific system to it. It
Yeah.
would probably make my life easier, but there's not. It's really, kind of some of it's seasonal. We do a romance roundtable every February and things like that. But a lot of it is just who would I like to talk to or who has reached out that sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So do you ever have like just a huge pipeline though? Like even, I mean, yes, it's, you have to say no at some point, but sometimes there's some really good ones and you've got already a pretty strong pipeline of candidates to interview. Do you find that you have a backlist?
We do.
Yeah.
I have folks on my list so we're scheduled through the spring. I try to schedule a season at a time. I haven't really thought about summer yet, but I have probably half a dozen authors who are waiting in the wings, I guess. We kind of just said, "Hey, we're booked, but I've got your information. I'll get back to you." So that list kind of just continues to grow. What I do is I sit down at the beginning of the year and say, "Who would I love to talk to?" Like
Hmm.
wild if this person really were willing to say yes. And we'll reach out to a few of those and then try to mix in more known names. I hate using bigger names, but more known names than with people that only their friends and family have heard of.
Sure.
And alternating those, working back and forth. But sometimes an author that I can't believe said yes says this is the only time I can do it, and then we drop everything and try to make things work to accommodate that because those conversations. One, because I'm a massive nerd and fan, and so when I can get Daniel H. Wilson on, I don't care when it is. We'll figure it out. We'll make it work, and we'll get him in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's always a list. I have never had to stop and go, man, who am I going to talk to this month? Because it's
Yeah.
usually several months out and plenty of folks waiting.
So why just Oklahoma? Why not just books in general or the writing industry or the publication industry? Why Oklahoma?
Well, partly because I don't know enough about the writing industry or publication industry to talk about that intelligently.
Yeah.
I love where I live. I have lived here most of my life. I went to college and seminary in Texas, so my wife and I were there for about 10 years, but this is home. And even though I wasn't aware of the breadth of the literary world, I was aware of Ralph Ellison and S.E. Hinton and, The Grapes of Wrath and these incredible books either written about Oklahoma or by people who are from here. And I wanted to celebrate who we are and where we live because I think it's worth celebrating. Oklahoma is often thought of as kind of this cultural wasteland with a few oil rigs and maybe even cowboys still running around. And man, nothing could be further from the truth. And so it's
True.
so much fun to get to demonstrate the breadth and the variety of work that comes out of here and the quality of work. I am blown away. As you can imagine, I get books from authors all the time. Hey, check this out, and love reading that kind of stuff. And am just consistently and constantly amazed at how good these writers that no one has ever heard of are. And then it's
Yeah.
like, well, I've got to make sure people find out about them because they're just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I want to pivot a little bit and
Yeah.
talk about your book. So you mentioned that your daughter published a book during COVID. So I'm assuming she published before you did. Is that right?
Yes.
And then
Yep.
you came along with your two books. Tell me what your writing journey was like, and why did you write those two books?
I have always wanted to write. I mean, I can think back as a kid in elementary school and junior high, and it wasn't always prose. I mean, I would write songs and I would write poems, and none of those will ever see the light of day, nor should they. Into college, and some of that went away a little bit as I got into ministry and then in education, because nothing will beat your desire to write harder than writing a dissertation that will end you. But I always just been fascinated by ideas and stories and wanting to just put my thoughts out into the world, and didn't really have, I mean, I'd had an idea for a novel that had been in my head forever and couldn't ever kind of get started with it. So then Hannah, my daughter, starts writing, and she has actually put out 3 or 4 books at this point. And I just more and more, when you're interviewing authors, you get excited about what they do and you think, I would love to do that, right? I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward to September of 22. I'm not going to get the timing right. I think that's right. When we found out that my son was having his first child. And that's what led to God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad, because I started thinking about, did I tell him all the things I hope he knows to be a good dad to my grandson? And as I thought about what that was, I thought, well, I can write some of that down and I'll send him some letters or notes or whatever. And then I started thinking about all of the young men in our lives, his friends, other people from church and other places who were in that early fatherhood stage of life. I was like, there's probably a lot of people who would benefit from just thinking about this stuff. Not that what I have to say is so brilliant, but sometimes it's just having somebody say, hey, have you thought about?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what led to it. And then I have to give credit to some of the authors that I talked to, because I learned, I don't know that I learned, but I got permission, I think, to write books in a certain way. Jeremy Kubicek, who is a guy that writes a lot in the leadership space from Shawnee, Jeremy, when he was on the show, talked about how he writes a book. And it's like, I just write a little piece at a time. So I know that my chapters are going to be a story and then some content and then some application and then kind of a wrap up. And so that's just how I write. Well, I thought I can do that. So as I'm thinking about this stuff that I want to make sure my son knows about being a dad, I can
Mm-hmm.
start with a story. I got lots of stories. And then just one piece at a time, kind of got permission, felt permission to create a book in that way. And then another author whose name has just fallen out of my head, and I'm going to deeply apologize and feel awful about it, wrote a book that was 9,000 words. And we had a fantastic conversation about this 9,000 word book. And I thought, oh, okay, so it is legal to write short books. Like, that's okay. And so then it gave me permission, because I didn't think I had 200 pages in me. It turns out I didn't, but I knew I probably had 100. And so to just kind of have permission again to write the kind of book that I really wanted to write. Of course, self-publishing makes it so much easier because there's nobody saying, no, you have to do this. And so all of that came together in really a fairly short span of time. My goal was to get it out before my grandson was born. And then he showed up 2.5 weeks early. So he showed all of us. But yeah, so that came out in March of 23. And it was my effort to tell my son and anybody else who is willing to listen, this is what it looks like to be a dad that is pursuing a life of faith and pursuing God, but also bringing his kids along with him.
Mm. See, I feel like as parents, we always complain that we don't have some kind of manual, a how-to
Right.
guide. And here you are feeling that niche, that need. So
Well, if only that easy, but yeah.
yeah, but we need one for moms too. So
Well, I can promise you I'm not qualified to do that.
tell us about your second book.
So as you mentioned, I'm the dean at Oklahoma City Community College. I've been in higher education for about 20 years now. And in every position you can imagine, and some you probably can't, but teaching all the way through. And this theme with students kept coming up, that smart students, prepared students, very capable students struggled, not because they weren't smart, prepared, or capable, but because the system is just nuts. It's convoluted, it's confusing. We use words that nobody uses anywhere else in the world. What's a bursar? What's a provost? I mean, these things that are meaningful to us because we use them all the time, but aren't for so many other students. And especially when I got to Oklahoma City Community College, we're dealing with a ton of first generation students. A lot of them are not first language English speakers. And so the challenge of navigating the system sometimes was enough to derail students.
Mm.
And I wanted to eliminate that to the extent that I could. So I sat down and literally just wrote down everything I could think of about the system and about how to think about where you want to go to college and how to do a campus visit that gives you information that's actually useful, how to apply. I mean, just even really basic stuff, writing your college essay and what does that look like? What happens after you're accepted? Just all of those pieces along the way, and then got into what does a successful first year look like? How do you prepare yourself to walk into class on the first day? Because eventually you're going to have to do that. There's a whole chapter dedicated to interacting with professors because I see so much where students now, you have a son, although Preston is very articulate and able to interact with people, but students really struggle just to talk to adults. And I would have students come in my office and couldn't look me in the eye and couldn't articulate what they were trying to, what kind of help they needed. So how do you talk to professors? How do you write an email to a professor that doesn't start with "hey" and then, doesn't have punctuation, that kind of thing? And then finish it with a chapter to parents. This is what it looks like to have a college student, because it's different than having a high school student. They're not the same person anymore. And so it's different when they come home, and it's different when you go and visit them, and just kind of helping parents think about that transition as well. And one of the things that I've heard from lots of folks who've read the book, there's also a chapter on what to do when things go wrong, because they do sometimes. And sometimes that can be as simple as I'm not getting along with my roommate, but sometimes that can be as big as I've been accused of academic misconduct and I didn't do it and I don't know what to do. And so helping students kind of think through how to navigate those things from the perspective of somebody who is in those conversations as a dean, but I've also sent all 4 of my kids to college. And so I know both the administrative academic side of it, but I also know the parent and the scared kid side of it, and trying to marry those two things in a way that is accessible. And so it's really meant to be a guidebook. It's not meant to, sit down and read it all the way through. But when you're trying to decide on college, read these chapters. And when you get accepted, read these chapters. And when you are in it, then read these chapters. But it's been a lot of fun, and it's taken me some just fun places and give me the opportunity to have some great conversations with tons of fascinating students.
Wow. I can see this book as like a second, third, fourth, fifth edition, kind of like the Chicago Man, style where you're like on the
Oh,
18th
don't bring that up. But yeah, there are things, I get asked questions all the time that aren't in it.
See, you need
And
to like wake up at, I don't know, 5:30 a.m.
don't wish those things on me, Amy. But that's it, that at some point there's going to need to be a second edition where I talk about whatever those things are that I do keep a list. But that just didn't make the first time around. Because at some point, the challenge of a book like this is, at some point you have to stop and, put out what's there and then wait on the second edition and go for the rest of it.
So you mentioned lists, and I'm wondering, are you a plotter kind of writer?
This is interesting to me because I am not a list or structured person at all. But what I have learned is in writing, I have to have a little bit of it. So as I was writing the book, we'll just take College Unpacked. I had a list of here are the things I want to talk about. And then, okay, where does that fit? But then I would sit down and just go. So, a little bit of structure is enough to kind of get my brain thinking about this thing. And then, okay, now I'm thinking about how to be successful in the first week, and then off and running. And that's when things get moved around and all that. I'm working on a novel finally, and I am shocked at the extent to which I need to outline story before I can sit down and do it, because I'll just spin my wheels forever. But if I have just a little bit of, then they're going to do this, they're going to talk about this, and this is going to happen, then I can sit down and just knock it out. So I am I'm somewhere in the middle, but I am more of a plotter than I ever would have believed I was.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm like that too, where like in my professional life prior to Quillhawk Publishing, I was working for executives and in the marketing space,
Right.
very much a plotter, methodical and meticulous about every single thing. But on the creative side, total pantser, right?
Right.
I tried the list thing and it just flew out the window. But I'm glad to hear that you're actually writing a novel because that was going to be one of my questions. You've done the two nonfiction.
Yeah.
Can you share a little teaser about your novel?
Uh, Man, I'm so hesitant. What I can tell you is it is about a guy who gets everything he ever wanted and then finds out that that might not be all it's cracked up to be.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, it is uh, it is not a book that anyone I know would think I would write.
Well, I
I,
can.
I'm surprised by it. So it has been a lot of fun. Just the process of watching these people evolve, and you always hear people talk about the characters take on a life of their own or just take off and run, and that's how it ended up being a book that I never thought I would write, because it's turned into just a very different kind of thing. But it's
Yeah.
a ton of fun.
Do you have a title for it? You don't have to
Uh,
share it, but you can. I'm
I do right now. The title is The Next Last Word,
okay. Okay.
but you know how that goes.
And when and when does that come out?
My goal is early August.
Oh, that's really close, right around the corner. Okay.
Yes, it is. Trust me, that's why my heart beats fast when I think about it.
Yeah. So are you going to go through the typical process of getting, either a critique team or alpha, beta readers, like all that stuff, or are you just going to?
We'll definitely do beta readers. The
Mhm.
challenge is going to be time, because I really, and that's why I self-published. Man, the long tail of how long it takes to get something out in the world, I'm just not patient enough. And someday perhaps, but I also just love the ability to say we're going to do something on this day and it happened.
Yeah.
So my goal is to have this out to some folks early in the summer so that we can make whatever adjustments we need to make by August. But goals are what they are.
I love the self-publishing route because it is a lot faster. It is the full creative control.
Yeah,
And you are truly accountable, for the work that you're putting out there. So,
right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and we've learned so much now that even in more traditional publishing, whatever that looks like, most authors are still being expected to do the exact same things that we're being expected to do as self-published authors, with platforming and social media and promotion and all that. The difference is we don't have the engine behind us,
Hmm.
but I don't know how much the engine matters for the average author who's putting their first book out in the world.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Okay, do you have any of your books that you would be willing to share, a reading from?
I just so happen to have both of them here with me,
A good
and
author should have his book next to him,
there you go. Always, right?
always.
So this is so the first one is from God Help Me, I'm a Young Dad, and this is so the way the book is structured. It's 10 essentials, each one just something that is a characteristic that I would encourage dads to have for themselves, and then also build into the lives of their kids. This last one, the 10th essential, is presence, and that's a little bit harder to do because your 4-year-old's not ready to be present yet. So a little different, but I'll just read a little bit of this. And I picked this one because it's about my dad, and
Mm.
I'm sure I'll make it through this with no problems. It says, "My poor dad. He spent untold nights and weekends of my elementary school years coaching me in baseball and football, only to end up with a musician. Instead of ballpark hot dogs and Friday night lights, he spent my high school years at band and choir concerts and musical productions, but he was there every single time. My dad's the hardest working human I know. Even in retirement, he's still looking around for the next thing that needs to get done. When I was in high school, he worked at a car dealership, which in the 80s meant he might go in at 9 in the morning and be there until midnight. 6 days a week, and only because you couldn't sell cars on Sunday in Oklahoma. He busted his tail to provide for our family, but he worked equally hard to make sure he was able to show up for the things he knew were important to us. I can remember plenty of nights when he would leave work for a couple of hours to attend a concert or award ceremony or game. He did get an athlete, my youngest brother, and then turn around and head back to work to finish out his day. The world of music was not one that Dad understood or was into very much. So it said all the more to me that he would show up and listen to March of the Cute Little Wood Sprites, which is an actual thing, by PDQ Bach, or endure 3 hours of high school singing and dancing. He had a standard response to these events. That was good.
Hmm.
It was all the critique he could offer. There were a handful of times when the response shifted to that was really good. And this was the sign that not only was the performance solid, but it was close enough to his wheelhouse to keep his attention. He stayed awake the whole time. That was high praise. I have the opposite experience of my dad. Somehow my musician wife and I ended up with a house full of athletes, and I credit her genes and my marginally unhealthy competitive streak for that. I've coached baseball, football, basketball, and soccer. I've logged countless hours in the stands for swim meets, triathlons, gymnastics, and cheer competitions. I show up with varying degrees of knowledge about what's going on, but always with plenty of enthusiasm. Fortunately for me, it's a whole lot easier to figure out if a team or an individual has done well than it was for my dad to know if our oboist nailed her solo. But that said, I still had to develop my version of that was good, and it usually sounds something useful like, you did great.
I loved it. Oh my gosh. What about the other book? Do you have that one too?
I do, right?
Okay, good, Jay. Give me more.
So this is from College Unpacked, and this is a little bit harder to find something because it's not really story driven as much as God help me, but maybe this will be helpful to somebody along the way. And if not, then here we go. But this is a chapter on thriving in class, talking about at some point you're going to have to start classes as a college student. All the preparation and mapping is important to success in your academic journey, but at some point you have to go to class and get to work. Setting yourself up for success on your first day. So we might as well start with the first day. After all the moving in and getting settled and welcome activities, classes are going to start. Starting well is a key component to being successful at any task, and this is particularly true of your classes as the patterns you establish early in the semester will persist throughout. So when it's time to start classes, get some sleep the night before. You want to be awake and ready for your first day. You're going to have a lot of information coming at you, and you want a brain that is alert and ready to receive it. You've got your whole college career to stay up too late. For the first few days, go to bed. Figure out where you're going before the first day. There is something to be said for walking around campus with confidence on your first day because you already know where your classes are. So take a few minutes during some downtime as you move in to find your classes on the campus map. It's even better to physically walk your campus and find them if you have the chance. Read your syllabus ahead of time if it's available. I heard you roll your eyes at this one, but seriously, it will only take you a few minutes to read through the syllabi for your courses, and this gives you a head start on the information that will be presented on your first day. It may also generate questions that you'll want to ask on the first day of class. Show up early. Planning to get to class early gives you a buffer if something goes wrong with campus transportation, or you get stopped by a slow crosswalk, or you can't quite remember where your classroom is. When you make it early, you'll also have a chance to pick out the perfect seat where you'll probably end up sitting all year, as we tend to be creatures of habit. And bring some way to take notes. Even on the first day, you're probably going to want or need to take notes. I get a laugh out of watching students scramble on the first day for a pen and paper or open up the note app on their phone because they weren't ready to know anything on the first day. When you get to class, come ready to learn.
It's not even just the first day, because some of these professors are cruel. They give you assignments before,
Oh, yeah.
before the semester starts or whatever, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, you're already 20 chapters behind or something like that. It's very intimidating and scary. So which I think it's amazing that you wrote this book and have it available for everybody.
And that's such a big part of it to me. I want students to step on campus confident. Even if they don't know all the answers, they know where to look for them. They know who to ask. They know how to think about things. Because that confidence, there's just something about feeling like I know what to do in this space. And it takes away some of the fear. It takes away some of the uncertainty. It takes away some of the imposter syndrome that I think shows up for a lot of our students, especially first-gen students who have nobody really in their lives that's done it that they can pattern after. And so when you walk on campus feeling like I I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. There's just something about that that takes away so much of the stress and anxiety.
Yeah. So a lot of things, I mean, one of the things that students don't know about, I think, are office hours. Most
Yeah.
professors have office hours, and it goes back to what you said about like not knowing how to speak to the professors, not making eye contact.
Yeah.
Where do you think that stems from, and how do we change that? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Prepare yourself for a, soapbox moment here. I I think COVID still has a lot to do with it, and I know that it's going to be easy to blame COVID for things for maybe the rest of our lives, but I'm not sure we fully appreciate yet what it meant for a generation of students to be isolated at these different ages when they were. I think if students were very young, elementary school when COVID happened and they were at home, that's different. But I think the junior and high school students who are now entering college, and even the older elementary students, they lost a really significant part of their social development because
Hmm.
they weren't interacting with people beyond their family or beyond their neighborhood or kind of beyond their immediate groups. And one of the things education does is put us in contact with lots of different kinds of people in every way imaginable, including talking to adults.
Hmm.
And so I think there's some of that. I also just, and this is going to sound like such an old guy thing. The amount of time that we spend on screens interacting digitally has impeded our ability to look someone in the eye. It's taken away our ability to not to think, but to think quickly, because that's part of conversation, right? Is being able to talk and respond and listen. And I know students who will come in my office with everything they want to say written out.
Hmm.
And if I ask a question that deviates from their script, you can almost just watch them buffer, trying to figure
Hmm.
out how to get their script back into the conversation that we're trying to have. And our education system is set up in such a way in K-12. And listen, God bless every K-12 teacher out there. And that, man, I'm so glad they do what they do. But a lot of that system is set to sit and receive information.
Yes.
And because we're conditioned to do that, students don't learn how to ask questions or how to respond or even how to challenge things in a way that doesn't come off as aggressive or disrespectful. And so a lot of what we see, a lot of the challenges we see between faculty and students is not because a student is being rude or disrespectful intentionally. It's that they don't know how to communicate any way other than to advocate for themselves, and they're trying to do it in a way that makes sense to them. And sometimes that comes off as disrespectful or rude to a professor who's not, on the other way side, not used to interacting with this youngest generation of students who we have.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces to it. Now, to the question of how do we fix it, we encourage our kids to have conversations with each other, with significant adults in their world. I had the chance this fall to do a series of talks for one of the tribes with their high school students as they were getting ready for college. And I challenged them over the span of the day that we were together to go find an adult and ask them the most random question they could,
Mm.
just to start a conversation. And then I told them I'm going to check on you at lunch and see if you did it. And some of them did, and some of them did. But just that very simple thing of go find somebody and ask them a question, have them make their own doctor's appointments, and even just things like that. We have this at the college level, parents who reach out on behalf of their kids to ask us questions, and we legally can't answer them,
Mm.
which creates all kinds of frustration. But what that tells me is that parent's been asking questions on behalf of their kid their whole life.
Mm.
And so that student is used to, when things go wrong, well, Dad, I need you to call and sort this out, or Mom, I need you to call and see if you can figure out what's going on. So just encouraging our kids to have those conversations. And for the introverts like me, that's scary, but I think it's just still so significant. And it gives you such an advantage if you can present yourself and advocate for yourself and just articulate thoughts without shivering because you're afraid of the fact that you're actually having a conversation with a human.
That is that is hard, I think, for as a parent. I'm guilty too,
Oh, sure.
emailing the school and, like for example, I'm taking my kid out of school for 3 weeks to go to Vietnam, and
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that it was done right. So what do? I sent the school an email with all this, fluff about humanitarian work and blah blah blah.
Right.
But you're right. It's a very scary thing for both sides, right? One to give control and trust that they'll do it right. And I don't know what the answer is there, except for to have maybe these mock interviews or these, role playing, as silly as
Yeah.
it may be, to have those kinds of exercises, when I was in recruiting, that's what I would do all the time is have these mock interviews and role playing, scenarios. And it was fun, but it was also pretty like eye opening,
Yeah.
don't say that, do say that, whatever. But
Right.
anyway, so I want to talk a little bit more about the podcasting too, because I'm podcasting now and I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
learn from the greats.
No, no.
Tell me, what are some of the pain points of starting a podcast? How do you keep it up? How do you
Hmm.
monetize it? Like, give us all your secrets. Spill the beans.
Oh man, if I had them, I would. Well, I will say this. I think the key to longevity, because when I started, so I started in 2021, which was probably the height of everybody getting a podcast independently. Now we're in this age of celebrity podcasts. It's a whole other thing. But in 2021, everybody was jumping in, everybody was trying. And when I think about the people who started at the same time, most of them are not in it anymore. And I think the key or a key is doing something that you are really, really passionate about and having a pretty clear idea of what that is. So a lot of podcasts that started were me and my buddy were hilarious when we sit around and talk about stuff. So we're going to sit around and talk about stuff and record it and people are going to love it. Well, that starts to get a little tired, right? Not just
Yeah,
for the people listening, but for you when you're sitting around with your buddy and you're like, oh, we've already talked about this before.
right.
So I think having a really clear thing that you are passionate about, want to talk about, and and making the thing that you want to make. Because the other thing, and this is true for authors as well, this idea of writing to market and doing whatever you think is going to sell. Well, man, you've got to live with the thing you produce for a long, long time. And if you're not passionate about it, that's going to get tired in a hurry. So,
Mhm.
they say the average podcaster does 7 shows and they quit. So
Mhm.
you're way ahead of the average at this point, because it's hard to keep going. It takes time. One of the conversations when I was getting ready to start, I sat down with my wife and I said, okay, here's what this looks like. This means that a night or two a week, I'm going to be in the closet. And are you okay with that? And so, having that conversation and just knowing that the time it takes to create, to edit, to work with guests, to promote, I mean, all the stuff that's a part of that, I think you have to go into it with pretty clear eyes. And I think the other thing that's worth remembering is none of us are going to get the contract that Joe Rogan got with Spotify, right? Nobody's coming to offer 9 figures for our shows. Would that they would, that would be amazing. I would take it. But that's just not how it works. And especially now, because in 2021, 2022, the money was really chasing podcasting as well. That's dried up pretty hard. And I think that's why we see more people falling away, because the idea that this is going to be a thing, it's going to be a side hustle, it's going to be something I can do to make money. Hopefully that's true, but for most of it, it's not. And less so now. And so you have this world where there's not as much money in podcasting as maybe we were led once to believe. But also, because so many people have jumped in, all the things that we use to podcast have become more expensive. When I started, most everything I used to produce my show was free.
Mm.
My recording platform, one of the editing platforms I used, obviously social media. I was paying like $13 for a Canva subscription and my host, and that was it. So maybe $30 a month. That's not true anymore, because all of these things have become expensive, and so it's harder to get in. You can still do it for not very much, but it's harder to do kind of a quality show for not very much. When you talk about monetization, I will tell you, I wish I had the secret. I have tried lots of things. Most of them have not been as successful as I wish they would be. But I think you, my goal with the podcast, if we just get as nuts and bolts as we can, is to break even, right? To figure out a way to generate enough that it pays for itself. This is not going to build my retirement home until they come with the Joe Rogan money. So maybe someday that'll happen, but not yet. So it's finding $50 here and $100 there, and a sponsor who's willing to jump in and take on a year or a couple of months or whatever. But doing that in a way that still serves your audience, and to me, that's a big deal. Like I don't want to sell mattresses on my show.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
I because that's not a value. So I want to promote authors. I want to promote companies that are serving authors. I want to promote bookstores. And the other challenge that I run into, and I know this is maybe a little bit unique to what we do, I also want to be really careful not to take money from some and not from others and do the same thing for them. And so I try to be very intentional about what advertising looks like, as opposed to me just saying, hey, this bookstore is doing this cool thing, or hey, this author's got this new thing out. Making it worth the money that people would spend, and not taking away from someone who is doing something similar. So yeah, man, I wish I knew. I wish I had the answer on that one.
Yeah, me too.
You and me and everybody else who's having the same kind of conversations we're having.
I think people don't realize, as a guest, they don't realize what it takes behind the scenes to do a
Yeah,
podcast. And so it's important to lay it out there, because it requires writing a script. It requires doing your research. It requires obviously editing, or platform promoting, marketing, things that
yeah,
we just don't like to do. But yeah, and it truly is a passion project.
has to be.
Yeah. So let's talk about your newsletter. How did that come about?
That was another one of those things that just kind of came out of the blue, because I like I mentioned earlier, I get books from independent authors all the time saying, "Hey, check this out, check this out." There's only so many that I can read in a given year because I have lots of other things I want to read. And, I want to, there are only certain kinds of books that I care to read. So, God bless you if you're a romance author and you send me your book. I might have somebody to give that to, but I'm not, that's just not me, right? I'm not going to spend reading time on that. And so I just got to thinking about the challenge, and some of this is from my experience, of getting the word out to as many people as possible in a way that doesn't cost a ton of money. And so this idea of Read Local, and it's local with an OK, by the way, because, that's what we do. So the idea of Read Local really was, what can I do that could celebrate authors when they are releasing their new books? Selfishly, it also puts me in touch with lots of authors who have new books to talk about. And so that also helps me find people for the show as I need to. But the heartbeat of it really is, I want to put these people and their work in front of as many people as humanly possible. And it's been really cool because I had no idea what the response was going to be.
Mhm.
And so we started in January. It's March, early March right now. I think we talked about this maybe coming out in April. So we'll be 3 or 4 issues in. I've had, I think, 9 or 10 books every time, and hundreds of people have read this newsletter and clicked on books and investigated. And I have no idea how much of that converts into sales because I don't see that side of it. But what I know is there are hundreds of people who have found out about books that they might not have otherwise found out about, which means that these authors have had hundreds of people see their work. And if
Mhm.
even just a few decide to grab a copy, well, that's got to be encouraging. And it's not, it's a couple dollars in the pocket, which is also not a bad thing. So it really is about serving these authors, and I'm committed. Authors can submit their work for absolutely free. And there's some paid things they can do to get, a cover picture and that kind of thing. $10 is the most anybody pays to have their stuff in there. But if you just want your book on it for free, come on. Because
Yeah.
I just want to platform and put that stuff out in the world.
It's a very selfless thing that you're doing to promote, to spotlight, showcase, these books and these authors. So bless you for doing that. And
Uh,
yeah.
I one of the things I figured out through this podcast is I am a cheerleader at heart, and I didn't necessarily know that. But if you've been on the show, you are in the bucket of people that I will cheer for forever.
Mm.
And it's funny, I ran into somebody the other day who had been on the show a couple of years ago as part of a roundtable, and she did not recognize me. But I recognized her and knew her name, and we were talking, and she finally stopped at halfway. She goes, "I'm so sorry. I think I'm supposed to know who you are, but I don't remember you," which was fine. Like that. Listen, I am who I am, but I want to cheer for these people, and so I found this was just another way to do that. And by the way, if you're listening and you're an author and you're thinking about it, it's okiebookcast.com/read local sub, and that's local with an OK, to submit your book to be added. And if you're just interested in listening to it, it's read local, LOKAL .substack.com.
So what makes a good guest and what makes a not so good guest?
Oh, Amy. Preparation, I think, is part of it. So I speak a lot to authors about appearing on podcasts. And one of the things I tell them all the time is go listen to an episode or two of the show, because you're going to learn how the guests or how the host asks questions. You're going to learn how they pause, so you're not interrupting them or they're not jumping in and interrupting you. You're going to learn if there's questions they always ask. So I ask the same three questions at the end of every episode. And one of the tells is when I get to those questions and the authors haven't thought about them at all.
Mm.
Because it means they didn't listen to the stuff I sent out ahead of time and whatever. That didn't happen very often anymore. Early on, it happened more than I probably want to admit. So I think that's part of it. I think having something to talk about beyond your book, for me, right, for a bookish podcast, having something else to talk about, having an interesting story, and the other thing, I know I'm thinking about specific conversations, so I have to be very careful about what I say and what I don't say. You need to be interested in the conversation. And I've had guests who clearly did not, like, one of whom I can think of reached out to me, and then when it got to the conversation, they were not interested in being there.
Oh,
And so, you're trying to pull teeth, you're trying to get enough time to justify, you don't want to shut a conversation down at 10 minutes and go, well, that's all we got for today. But even just, body language and things like that. And I will say one more thing. When you're on a podcast, video or audio, but particularly if it's audio, make sure everything around you that can make noise is not around you. You've probably had this where somebody picks up a glass and takes a drink and there's ice in the cup, and they always swirl their ice every time they take a drink. They don't realize they're doing it. And now you've got to deal with that on audio while they're talking, or they're wearing jewelry that bangs against a microphone, or just all that kind of stuff, which is minor in the world of problems. But when you're editing, it's one more thing. But I think the biggest deal of being a good guest is just being excited about what you want to talk about, and being ready to come on and bring it.
yeah. Not having your dog interrupt and steal the thunder.
I don't mind that so much. I've had all kinds of pets show up in shows because I don't do video, so it doesn't matter as much.
Okay, remind the listeners, what are your 3 questions that you always ask, and what would be your answer?
Oh, I was afraid you're going to ask me that. So the 3 questions I always ask, one is, what's a genre that you love to read? And give us a couple of examples of recommendations of books for authors. And mine would be science fiction. I am mad for it, have been since I was very, very young. And I always tell people John Scalzi Needs to be read by anybody who is remotely interested in science fiction. And you can read standalones are a lot of fun, or these big sweeping space operas. So it's kind of whatever you're into. Adrian Tchaikovsky is another name like that. His stuff is even more involved than Scalzi. Scalzi's funny, and so it makes it a little bit lighter when you start. And then I've just encountered The Bobaverse by Dennis E. Taylor, which is a series of books about a guy named Bob who becomes an artificial intelligence and moves out into the universe in a way that he can self-replicate. And that is the nerdiest sentence maybe that's ever been said on your podcast. But I just, it's so fun because it's hard science fiction, but it's funny and it's smart and it's just great. So there's three for you: John Scalzi, Adrian Tchaikovsky, and Dennis E. Taylor. Second question is, what's an early experience that informed your reading or your writing life? I don't have a great answer to this question. I have read for as long as I can remember, and even further back. There is a story of me reading what was written on a bathroom wall at a truck stop on a trip with my grandfather. And obviously, I won't share what I was told I said that day. At 3 years old, I was reading and doing all that. I think if I were to pin something down, I would just say, and this is a very common answer to this question. There was a teacher, there were multiple teachers along the way who said, "You're pretty good at this." And to have that kind of support and encouragement in when I think about Mrs. Dillon in my 8th grade creative writing class, who just said, "You know what, you've got some good ideas and you write pretty well." That's life changing to a 13-year-old boy who feels like he should be playing football, but really kind of wants to do this other thing as well. And so yeah, shout out to Mrs. Dillon and all of those incredible teachers along the way. The third question, and this is the one that trips everybody up. If you could have a meal with one character from fiction, who would it be and what would you talk about? And I got asked this question on a podcast years ago, and out of nowhere, I came up with the boy from Cormac McCarthy's The Road, which is a story about a father and son traveling across a post-apocalyptic landscape. It is a very bleak book. It's hard to recommend because it's a very difficult book. But the boy represents incredible hope all the way through the book. And at the end of the book, I don't want to spoil anything, but things change for him in a significant way. And I would love to find out what happened after that.
That's
So
beautiful.
there you go.
I love it. I gotta pick a bone with you, Jay, because
Uh-oh.
saving this for last. No, it's a good thing because I love your podcast. I unfortunately don't get to listen to it as much as I like to or used to. But
Sure.
at one point, I think you and your daughter were talking about, the next greatest read or whatever.
Hmm.
And I think one of the books that she was reading had to do with true crime. For the life of me, I can't remember what it was about. But then I went down this rabbit hole where I bought a bazillion audiobooks. True crime, like, listening to the O.J. Simpson story or what have you. And that is the impact and the power that you guys have
I love that.
your listeners. So I want to give you a thank you, a special shout out for that and getting me back to, even though it's audiobook, getting me back to reading. Because I've had books that are on my TBR pile forever, and now I'm slowly getting to them, even though they're 3 years old. 3 years ago that they were on my pile. But that is what you're doing, is you're fostering that excitement, that interest again to get back to reading. Whatever the genre is, you just got to find the book that speaks to you and go for it. So with that,
And
thank you.
honestly, I mean, that is the very best thing. Every time I hear that, it does something inside, because I love reading and I love helping people and encouraging people to do it. And if we can, in whatever goofy ways we do things, encourage people and help them find books that they love, then man, mission accomplished.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, are there any topics that we didn't cover that you want to talk about or promote?
Oh, well, I'll just let everybody know how to find me and the show, I guess. So okiebookcast.com, and it's OKIE book Bookcast.com is kind of the central point for everything that we have. You can find the show, you can find my books through there. We've mentioned a couple of times, but I do definitely want to let everybody know about so we do an interview show, and then once a month we do the recommendation review show that you're talking about with my daughter, the author, where we talk about books that we're reading, and that can be anybody from anything. That's not an Oklahoma only show. And we get into some wild and really, really fun conversations with some wild and really, really fun people. I love doing that because we get to just bring on people who can create absolute chaos, and whatever happens, happens. But that's called Your Next Great Read. That comes out at the end of every month. All of that stuff you can find at okiebookcast.com. And then, like I mentioned earlier, social media was really easy for me because nobody else wanted to be the Okie Bookcast. And so Okie Bookcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I do a ton of like review and list kind of stuff on TikTok, which has been a lot of fun, doing short video stuff, which is easier for me than sitting down and doing what you do, which is record a video podcast. I think that's it. I'm easily found. And I think the other thing I would say, and I've already said a version of it, if you are a creative person or think you might be, because honestly, we all are, it just looks different. Go make the thing that you want to make. The gates are still guarded, but there's no fence anymore.
Hmm.
And so you can walk right around them and self-publish your book or self-publish your music or create your podcast or whatever. And there's literally nobody can tell you you can't. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so, yeah, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, could I do this? Yes. And I won't speak for Amy, but I will tell you, if you are thinking about a podcast and you want somebody to just bounce an idea off of, give me a yell. We'll figure it out.
I love that. And I completely 100% agree in terms of the fence not being there, right? Because we have so much freedom today to
Yeah.
be creative.
It's
And
so
what
fun.
that looks like, go for it. Cook your greatest meal, write your songs, whatever it is,
Yeah.
just go for it. So thank you, Jay. With that, we'll go ahead and close out the podcast. So listeners, from building the Okie Bookcast into a trusted space for readers, to launching Read Local as a way to elevate Oklahoma's literary voices, Jay reminds us that culture doesn't just happen, it's cultivated.
Hmm.
And through classrooms, conversations, community, he's proving that stories are more powerful when they're shared close to home. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to check out the Okie Bookcast, subscribe to Read Local, and explore Jay's books. And especially if you're navigating fatherhood or the college journey, which I am definitely doing that with my son. And as always, thank you for listening to Quixotic Heights, where we explore the bold ideas, brave journeys, and visionary building shaping our world one story at a time. So until next time, ciao bellas and ciao bellows. Thank you so much, Jay. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Amy.